Oh boy, this is uh this is really gonna piss some people off, huh? So before I really get started in this, let me start by saying this. This is just my opinion. If you like the new Elden Ring DLC and you're really having a blast playing it, that's cool. Keep having fun with it. I'm not trying to be an asshole on the internet that's trying to make you feel guilty for liking something I don't. That's that's not what I'm here for. I'm just a guy with an opinion that I know it's going to upset some people, but I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to piss anyone off, and I'm not doing this to get your attention. This is honestly how I feel about the current state of the Elden Ring DLC, and for whatever reason, I feel compelled to put it on the internet. And now let me say this. I like Elden Ring. I have put almost 200 hours into the game, and I would not have done that to a game that I did not enjoy. I do think it's not I don't think it's the best Souls game FromSoft has produced. I believe I'm kind of somewhere between Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne for that title. But overall, I think it's a very fun game. It's basically Dark Souls 4 in all but name. It's Dark Souls 3 with some asset flips and with like an open world design. And well, it's not perfect, I think, overall. The game was solid. And I was really looking forward to the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I was a little confused why it took so long, but considering that the development of Armored Core was in between Elden Ring and the DLC, I'm assuming that has something to do with it. So I've waited over 2 years now for this DLC to come out, and we knew it was going to come out pretty early on with how great Elden Ring did. And now that I've played it, I'm I'm kind of disappointed. And it's not because I don't think that FromSoft didn't put real effort into this game, or that I think they like cut corners on the presentation or anything like that, or that I think the new weapons and stuff aren't cool. No, I think for the most part, FromSoft kept up their standard of quality as that they have with their other games. And in that sense, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is something to be commended. What's really irking me about this DLC is mainly two things: how the game handles stats and the boss design. So, what do I mean by stats? So, when I started my playthrough through the DLC, I'm using my endgame character, who at this point I've used to beat every single major boss in the game. I've beaten Elden Beast, I've beaten Platasax, I've beaten Melania. Besides, like, maybe one or two bosses that's in, like, a cave or something that I might have missed, I've beaten every single major boss in this game. And I'm not saying that to brag, like, oh, I'm one of the best players in the game ever. No, I'm absolutely not. But the point I'm getting at is that the build I'm using is a character I've put several hours into. That's a character that is not quite level 200 yet, so not at the top, but around 190-ish. So he's definitely up there. So, so imagine my surprise when I start the DLC, and the next thing I know, I'm getting like two-shotted by almost every enemy in the DLC, which was really confusing because my character has very high stats. I'm using heavy armor. I'm using the Banishment set, by the way. And I'm using talismans to boost my stats and all that. And I'm still going down in like 2 to 3 hits. And I'm not just talking about the bosses. I mean, most of the basic enemies of this game are wiping the floor with me. And I was really confused, like, what's going on? And that's when I realized that this game either nerfs your player stats when in the DLC world, which is called the Shadow Realm, by the way, which as a Yukio fan makes me laugh. But anyways, while in Shadow of the Erdtree, the game either nerfs the hell out of your character stats, or they raise the enemy stats ridiculously high. And I think the reason they did that, whichever one is true, again, I'm not a game developer or anything like that, so I can't tell which one it is. But as soon as you start the DLC, you get this prompt that there's these items that you can find throughout the world that will buff your stats that you can use at the site of grace, and then the more you use, the more it'll stack up. And I'm first like, okay, that's cool and all, but I'm not going to use those because my character stats already on the higher end of things. Again, it is an end game build, so it's like I'll try not to use them, and then I'm getting my ass kicked horribly. So I'm like, okay, so I guess I'll use them, and even then, I'm still getting like 2, 3 hitted by most enemies in the game, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And the reason why that's really frustrating is because, again, this is a character build I've put over 100 hours in, like over a week of my actual lifespan I put into playing this game to build up my character, to get all the best gear I could find, to upgrade all my weapons, to get all the spells I could find to get access to. And I'm getting destroyed like I'm only like level 10. And it just feels really, really strange. And I know why they did it. It was so it encouraged you to find these items throughout the world, and I'm not sure if they did it to incentivize exploration of the new world they built, or if it's a way to keep the game difficult for people who've already beaten the main game, because I'm assuming that most people who access the DLC are people who have, for the most part, beaten the game, because the game's been out for 2 years, right? So most of the people who are playing the DLC have probably beaten the game at least once and may or may not be a New Game Plus. I'm not a New Game Plus, so it's not like any of the values have changed for that. I purposefully did not start New Game Plus because I wanted to play through the DLC first when it came out and didn't have to worry about enemies having higher health and attack or anything like that. Because again, I'm not the best Souls player. I'll be first to admit that. But to have a build that's as far as into the game as mine is, and just get absolutely trashed by the most common enemies in the game, that's horribly demoralizing. It's horribly demoralizing. It's like, okay, great, you made it through all the way through the main game, beating some of the most difficult bosses we made in the Soul series. But now, when you start this DLC, we're gonna go, fuck you. You're either nerfing your stats or just making enemy stats ridiculously high. Speaking of which, the boss design in this game is atrocious. Almost every main boss in the DLC is moving around, pulling a bunch of anime bullshit like their second phase Millennia. But as bad as second phase Millennia could get, at least the silver lining was that Millennia's health pool was on the lower end as far as major bosses went. But the enemies in, or the enemy bosses in the DLC have bosses like they're the boss of an MMO raid. I have no idea. I have no idea, even with max stats, how anyone in this game who haven't collected all those whatever those items are that are basically mandatory to get through the game at all, didn't get beat the bosses without using like the mimic tier or one of the like co-op summons. I don't know. And I know they're screwing around with my character values because every time I bring out the Mimic tier, who has the exact same build as my character does, and when the boss hits them, it only takes like a quarter of the damage I'm taking. I'm staring at that and I'm like, what the hell were they thinking? I don't know. Maybe the issue is that I'm not getting good because I know some people are gonna cry about that in the comics. Oh, just good, man. Just grind all the way to max level. Just throw yourself at the boss again and again and again 1,000 fucking times till you know his pattern by heart. And for some players, that's fine. If that's the way you want to play Elden Ring, then go ahead. But as someone like me who's trying to use my knowledge of the game mechanics to give myself an edge in battle and not have to force myself to just constantly throw myself at a brick wall until it finally crashes, it's it's horribly frustrating. And I don't know what FromSoft was thinking when they made this decision, because this way of them artificially inflating the difficulty by playing around with the stats, it it really rubs me the wrong way. It's like all this time I spent trying to get better at the game, building up my stats so I can access the weapons I want to access and the spells and all that, using the best armor I can, using the weapons, Ashes of War, summons, and spells the best of my ability, because Elden Ring, more than any other Souls game, encourages that, only to tell me to go fuck myself for even trying. It's it's really upsetting. And for the last big thing is the final boss of the DLC, who, believe it or not, is actually a rematch fight of a boss you fought in the main game. Now, I won't spoil who that is in case that's something you want to see and haven't got there yet. But I'm just saying now, it's not who you would expect for what it would be. I mean, I sort of get why they picked this boss in particular for the finale, but as the finale of the DLC, it's not awful, but when you compare it to FromSoft's other DLC entries, like you had Artorias in the Dark Souls 1 DLC, you had Slave Knight Gale for Dark Souls 3, Orphan of Cause for Bloodborne, the Old Hunters, or whatever it's called, I forget, sorry. It's really baffling that they made the finale of this DLC technically a rematch. And I get they're kind of going for the whole Lothric twins thing in Dark Souls 3 because with the kind of character Miquella is built up as, I don't think that making a solo fight with Miquella as the finale appropriate. Because again, that's just not the character that they've written for. But it's just, I don't know. I'm just really confused why it turned out the way it did. And it kind of makes me regret paying $40 for this game. Yeah.